All right, let's get right into it. We're looking at an incredibly tense situation unfolding in one of the world's most critical waterways, a standoff that has brought major world powers to the absolute edge of conflict.
And that quote you just saw, that's not some kind of exaggeration from our source material. It really sets the stage for the crisis we're talking about, one that has put global trade and peace on a total knife's edge, with military forces on high alert.
So, the big question is, how did we even get to this point? Well, it all kicked off with a really direct, really dangerous confrontation that sent shockwaves across the globe and brought shipping in the region to a grinding halt. And this is the moment right here, the flashpoint that just lit the fuse. You've got Iran's Revolutionary Guard firing warning shots at Indian oil tankers, no less. There were even reports of missiles landing nearby. The ships, of course, had to turn back. And just like that, the Strait of Hormuz, we're talking about a vital artery for global energy, was effectively blockaded.
But here's the thing. This isn't just about a couple of ships having a close call. No, this goes much deeper. It's about a conflict that's been simmering for years, fueled by this incredibly complex web of global alliances. You've got local tensions getting cranked up to 11 by superpower rivalries.
And you can see the lines drawn in the sand right here. You've got the U.S. bloc, right? The United States, its long-standing ally Israel, and now, interestingly, India seems to be leaning more in that direction. And then on the other side of the table, you have Iran, and they are not alone. They're backed by heavy hitters like China and Russia, who are pretty open about supporting Iran's position on controlling the strait.
So what you're seeing here is a fundamental clash of game plans. The U.S. strategy, it's all about what they call maximum pressure. Basically, a full-on economic blockade designed to squeeze Iran. Iran's countermove, they're using their biggest bargaining chip, their control over the Strait of Hormuz. Their whole philosophy seems to be, you can't defeat a nation that refuses to surrender.
Okay, so you might be thinking, why does this matter to me? Well, the ripple effects are already hitting, and they're hitting hard. We're talking about massive lines for fuel and cooking gas in places like India. We're talking about critical fertilizer shipments for farmers getting stuck, which, threatens the food on our tables. Seriously, one little choke point like this has the power to unleash soaring inflation and maybe even a global economic crisis.
All right, so the global economy is teetering on the edge. The pressure is mounting. Somebody has to do something, right? And that's exactly when a pretty unlikely player stepped onto the scene, trying to pull everyone back from the brink.
And in a move that I think surprised a lot of people, that player was Pakistan. Its capital, Islamabad, suddenly becomes the neutral turf for these high-stakes talks. And it makes sense when you think about it. Pakistan has these unique relationships with everyone involved: Washington, Tehran, even Beijing. So they were able to step into that role of, the central mediator for this whole crisis. But how did they pull it off? Well, it wasn't just a matter of saying, hey, you can use our conference room. Pakistan's leadership had a very careful playbook. First, they had to build trust, which meant tons of high-level talks with both Washington and Tehran. Then they had to secure that neutral space. And finally, the really hard part, actively getting in the middle of it, working behind the scenes to make sure the whole thing didn't just collapse.
And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. The feeling on the ground, according to our source material, is that this move has totally changed the game for Pakistan. It's elevated them to this new level, almost like a regional superpower, where a decision hammered out in Islamabad, well, it might just stick everywhere.
Okay, so getting everyone to the table is a huge win, but that's just the start. The talks themselves? Oh man, it's been a total roller coaster. One minute there's hope, the next it's all mistrust and frantic last-minute diplomacy just to keep it from blowing up.
Look at this timeline. It just shows you how shaky the whole thing is. The ink is barely dry on the announcement for talks, and boom, the U.S. seizes an Iranian ship. Naturally, Iran is furious and threatens to boycott. It literally takes round-the-clock work from Pakistan just to smooth things over. And then, just when you think it's stable, the U.S. completely changes its delegation. It just adds a whole new level of what happens next to the mix. And this right here, this is the core of the problem. Both sides have drawn these red lines in the sand that they say are non-negotiable, and just look at how far apart they are. The U.S. wants a 15-year halt to uranium enrichment, total inspections, and for Iran to stop supporting its allies. Iran, they want a complete end to sanctions, all U.S. troops out of the Middle East, and a guarantee they won't be attacked. How do you even begin to bridge a gap that wide? So the negotiators are basically walking through a minefield. You've got decades of bad blood and broken promises. You've got this weird U.S. strategy of, hey, let's talk, but also we're going to keep punching you.
And then, back home, both leaders have to deal with hardliners who think any kind of compromise is basically surrender. It makes negotiating in good faith, well, almost impossible.
So let's zoom out for a second, because beyond just this one crisis, this whole standoff could be a sign of something much, much bigger. Some experts are looking at this and saying, this might be our first real glimpse of a new world order.
And this kind of shows you what they mean. The perception is that the US and Israel are finding themselves more and more isolated. Meanwhile, you have Iran, which has somehow managed to withstand all this pressure and is now being seen as this incredibly resilient regional power. And they're not standing alone, they're getting very public support from a rising China and a resurgent Russia. It's a real shift.
And you can't forget about the guys making the moves on this giant geopolitical chessboard. For leaders like Trump, Netanyahu, and Modi, the stakes are not just global, they're personal. I mean, we're talking about their political futures. Whether this whole thing ends in a historic peace deal or a catastrophic war, that could be the one thing that defines their entire legacy.
And so that brings us right back to the central, burning question. The diplomats are talking in Islamabad, sure, but the warships are still out there in the Gulf. With this much bad blood and with red lines drawn so firmly in the sand, the whole world is holding its breath. Can diplomacy actually work here? Or are we just watching the inevitable slide into a much wider, much more devastating conflict?